Good evening, everyone. This is Jay Simmons and Greg Moran of Mach 30 coming to you on May 7th, 2015 for the May 2015 Reports Hangout. For those of you that don't know Mach 30, we are a nonprofit here in the US that does open source spaceflight hardware to advance humanity into a spacefaring civilization. Greg is coming to us from the DC area. Say hi, Greg.
Howdy.
And if you are in any of our meetings or follow us, you'll know that it's actually something unusual to have me actually coming from Dayton, Ohio for a change, as I've been traveling quite a bit this year. Thank you very much. Also, if you follow us, you may have noticed that we missed the April Reports Hangout, but there was all sorts of discussion about that on the event page that night because we were one of, as far as I could tell, dozens, if not way more than dozens, of groups that were locked out of On Air Hangouts that week. It was not just that night, as I recall. So we're very happy to be back on the air.
Technical difficulties.
Yep. Quite a few people had to cancel or postpone events. But we're happy to be back on the air and bring you all sorts of good stuff to discuss from spaceflight in general and at Mach 30. Real quick, I did want to comment briefly, though, on what we were planning on discussing last month, because we had all sorts of exciting news. Last month, we were ready to announce the release of the Mach 30 2014 annual report, which was a first for us, which super exciting. Head over to mach30.org.
Oh, yeah. You can actually find that plan. We've already posted it, and there's a blog post, so feel free to read the report. Check it out, make some comments about fun stuff that you participated in, or let us know what you think.
Yep. We were also very excited to announce the release of the 2015 annual plan. So those timings were not a coincidence. That as we were wrapping up review of the 2014 work we did, we were also finalizing approval for the work for 2015. We will continue to discuss the 2015 work throughout the remainder of the year, but I'm not going to go through this week. We won't go through this month a point-by-point discussion of that. But I'm very excited about the work we'll be doing. It will focus on a combination of technical projects and outreach to spread the word about Mach 30. So I encourage you to when you see stuff that we're doing that you like, please share it on social media. Please tell your friends at the water cooler and all that, because that is one of our major focuses for this year. And Greg's taking point on a lot of that, while I'm taking point with the Engineer Speak community on the technical work. Do you want to add anything to that before we wrap up the review from last year or last month?
That's pretty much it. You'll hear about all the stuff that's on the 2015 plan month by month as we do more reports hangouts.
And then finally, we were also announcing the two first big pushes of 2015 in detail last month, which was our major technical project for 15 is what is being called the Yavin thruster. It's a project to develop a indoor runnable 3D printable laboratory for education purposes rocket propulsion system to be the descendant of the experiments we were doing on the Shepard test stand, so that more people in more environments at more times could run rocket experiments and learn about how rocket propulsion works, especially in classroom settings. So we're very excited about that. You'll hear more about how...
You haven't actually said it's a cold gas thruster.
Yeah, the magic phrase is a cold gas thruster, yes, which is why it's suitable for indoor use. Basically, it uses the energy stored in a compressed air tank to produce thrust, as opposed to the chemical reaction in something like the solid rocket motors from Estes that we were testing with Shepard. So, and then the other big push that's at the beginning of that's in the first half of the year is Apogee 2, our second annual conference, and we will actually talk more about that tonight. So I'm very excited that we're making progress on getting that prepared. So that's
is that a good segue?
the very short version. Yeah, that's the very short version. So so yeah, it's a great segue. Why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about Apogee 2, because we've been doing a lot of planning work on that lately.
So I think what we would have talked about last month is that we've picked a date, or a date range, I guess, probably around the end of July, and we're looking to come here to DC.
Either beginning or end. It's either beginning or end, right?
Yes, that's true. There's a plan A and a plan B. So sometime in July, and we did decide that we'll come here to the DC area. We have a couple of folks in the Baltimore DC metro region, and we'll look to get our volunteers back here on the East Coast, get some of the Mach 30 board members all together in the same location. I remember that being a really big bonus and a lot of fun from the first year that we were all co-located in person. We finally get to hang out and see each other face to face rather than screen to screen.
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually something we talk about all the time, that we try to go to conferences whenever folks have the bandwidth, both you know, schedule and time wise, because we value that face-to-face interaction with each other and with folks out in the world so much. And so it's actually, I think you were reminding me just the other night that how critical that is to the secret sauce that it was Apogee last year.
Mm-hmm. So right now the agenda is still in works. We don't have a lot of details to release quite yet, but we're still going to balance the public-facing, some scaled-back public events with the board retreat, which is going to be a big part of the annual Apogee event. Keep that going like we have been doing at Mach 30 since the beginning.
Yep, and we'll still have the banquet, the volunteer banquet in the evening. Yep, and we will also, I think we're really working hard to also include one other piece on the agenda where the existing volunteers can work on a project together for a concerted chunk of time, like half a day or something like that. Where in person, where they can't usually do that much all at once. Often we have to work in fits and starts because folks are doing things after work and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it should be a very good event. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to have it here in the DC area. Anything else on Apogee, Jay, that you have?
I'm thinking real quick. I think the other thing to point out, though, about the DC area is just how excited we are, not just because you get to have it in your backyard this year, but that all of the I don't know how quite to capture the word, but you've caught a lot of buzz in DC. There's a lot of energy there in the maker community, especially. And I'm looking forward to getting to share our message with that much buzz around.
Right, the energy in the city is very different, and I guess you and I have talked about how Dayton was very different from Albuquerque. Each city has its own personality. The maker scene is very different. The hacker spaces have different personalities. The space enthusiasts have very different outlets in each area. And I think DC has a lot of everything. So I started mapping out the hacker spaces in the area, and I'm up to about 8 within the metro area here. So I keep adding more as I hear about them in different space organizations and open source kinds of projects. I've started a map of all of that. So I look forward to sharing that with you as well.
Excellent, excellent. You should, when you get that a little further along, maybe you could share that as a blog post on the website.
Yep.
And I remember when that was not as recognizably the case. Like, it may have still been the case, but it was not as easy to see that was the case. And I don't know how much that was things in the community have changed, and how much about that is having boots on the ground. But I remember we had looked in the DC area because there were a couple of spaces that were in the news, and saw things not as dramatically different than we had seen in other places.
I think
so
a lot of
I
it is
wonder how
having
much.
boots on the ground. I definitely have seen things in person and by word of mouth that I would not have seen just searching on the internet. That's probably the true in a lot of different cases, but markedly true here.
Yeah. Well, and again, that goes back to actually getting on site and getting people in places and actually meeting people and shaking hands and getting to know them. I mean, I make it a point whenever possible when I'm in a new town for the first time on travel, or on the rare times that I get time on repeat travel, to go visit maker spaces that I haven't been to, if at all possible, or even better yet, revisit maker spaces, because I travel so much and I've gotten to see a lot. I've seen one in Denver. I've seen one actually in Bristol, United Kingdom. I've seen a couple around DC now. It's just very important to be in person, which again is really the heart of Apogee, right?
Yep. And there's more to show you, so
I can't wait.
We'll take some time off to do that. Maybe a side trip.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's where Apogee 2 is, and expect the agenda to get finalized in the not too distant future. July is coming up fast, and as soon as the agenda is finalized, look for it on the blog and on our website.
Yep.
Speaking of blogs and website and news of that nature, Greg, did you notice just how much we had this week in the news for active tests, either test flights or on the ground?
I actually couldn't miss it based on basically my news feeds all filling up with pictures and videos and tweets of congratulations and other publications of at least 3 different flights or tests.
Yep. Yeah, I know of. I noticed 3, and I actually saw them first. While afterwards, I saw a lot of stuff on my feeds too. I saw precursors of the announcements actually, because Julie had been posting on our P2 forums. So it started just about a week ago, maybe a little over a week ago, with information about Blue Origin's test. I think was the first one, maybe, which was
space, right?
insane. I don't remember if they quite passed the Kármán line or not. I didn't get a chance to read all the technical details, but it was a significant test. And it was the first very public thing they had done, if I recall correctly. They've been very, very close to the chest.
Yep. I don't remember the timing of it, but it had been a long, long time since they've done a previous flight. And I don't know if it, like you said, was just below the Kármán line, or if they actually passed the threshold into space. But I saw the video of it. Man, that's a spectacular vehicle.
It was a very beautiful test flight from the video. And it was exciting to see a group that has been so quiet, do something so public. It's always exciting to get to see how things have come along. And it's a pretty ship. So that
kind of odd geometry, but
yeah, I wonder how much of that is the nature of test hardware or being suborbital versus what it will be for an orbital vehicle. I actually have not really followed Blue Origin enough lately to even know what that vehicle represents, like where it was, where it is in their spectrum. There you go. There you go. I don't know, because no one does. Or at least in part.
It's good to see.
Which also reminds me, the other thing they popped up on the news pretty recently was, aren't they part of on the running for propulsion system for the ULA Vulcan rocket?
So I don't know. I didn't hear anything about that.
Oh, so maybe like a month ago or so, I think ULA announced the successor to Atlas and Delta, that they were calling, that they're at least right now calling Vulcan. Well, I think they announced it as Vulcan, and I think Blue Origin got a nod for the at least one of the stage's propulsion systems. So they've been in the news a couple of different times lately.
congratulations to them
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. And of course, back to tests, it was quickly on the heels of Blue Origin was Copenhagen Suborbitals doing some static test firings of one of their propulsion systems. Did you get a chance to see any of that video, Greg?
I did. Not all of them. I think there was at least 6 or 8 different camera views of, I think you said 3 different tests.
I think it's 3 firings they did that day.
Yeah. Again, didn't get to watch all of them, but the 1 or 2 views that I watched had beautiful Mach diamonds throughout the entire exhaust plume. I'm like, wow. I was geeking out about it with my rocket scientist hat on.
The technical stuff was impressive, but the thing that I noticed the most was that it was a publicly invited event. They had tickets and they were selling concessions, and they ran the YouTube stream the whole time. It was like an 8-hour YouTube stream from during the entire test day. And Julie posted, I think she posted or she emailed me that they're doing another round of that, like maybe this weekend, with the same thing. And one of the, while I've certainly had I've always been impressed with Copenhagen. I've had my ups and downs about how they were doing their work. This comes much closer than anyone, including ourselves, have come to some of the things that you and I talked about very early on about community engagement for folks that were of the variety of supporters that were about being enthusiastic about space. Period. That they were the folks that miss Apollo, right? The orphans of Apollo. That there's nothing that there are not enough big launches and big community events to go to and witness. And this is the first time in a while. SpaceX is doing some of that, but this had a much more community feel that was much closer to stuff you and I talked about that it would be nice if we could do.
And I think
I was
it's
really
because
excited
it matches the grassroots feel really matches the organizational style. Mach 30 and Copenhagen are kind of kindred spirits, if you will.
Yeah. Absolutely. They and so it was really exciting to see that and to see it actually work. Like I didn't get a chance to see how much audience was there, but just to see that they repeated that audience process again with this upcoming test firing set as well.
We'll have to make sure that's on my calendar then. We'll take a look at that.
And it looked like all the tests, as far as I could see from the follow-on reports, went well for Copenhagen, I think. Again, I didn't get to sit through the 8-hour day as cool as it would have been, but it looked like they had all successful tests, which is awesome. Congrats to them.
They usually do a pretty good job of following up with a blog post or some other kind of results. Whether or not it's in the actual data, I don't think they post that, but a summary, at least a narrative blog about how things went. I'd expect to see that here in the next couple of days as well.
Yeah. And again, the increased tempo is also exciting for them, because I'm pretty sure it was like not even 2 weeks ago, it might have only been a week ago, and they're getting ready to do it again very soon. So and tempo is actually a big thing for sustainable operations. So that's very, very impressive. Very cool news,
especially for a small all-volunteer nonprofit group.
Amen. And then comes the big kahuna in the news, which I think everyone by now has heard. SpaceX's latest test flight, which didn't even involve going to space, but it was the launch abort test flight. That was. I did get to see all of that video because it's like a minute and a half.
Right, I did too.
Yeah.
Where was you said? Okay, the locations for all of these, right? One was Copenhagen. Where was Blue Origins?
I don't remember where their flight was, but I think it must have been. It was inland. The video was very clearly inland,
right,
somewhere. So I think.
And then this one was.
Are they over in one of the Texas flight? Are they in one of the Texas facilities? Maybe it's wherever their test facility is.
Blue Origins might be the Oklahoma spaceport, but I'm just guessing on that.
Now I gotta look.
curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, we're on Google Hangouts, which means I have access to the Googles.
I was just commenting on all of these taking place all over the globe, and the SpaceX flight did a splashdown landing, so it must have been on one of the coasts. I'm assuming Kennedy.
It was at the Cape. It was at the Cape,
Yep.
Absolutely. Blue Origin was at the West Texas launch site.
Okay.
Was where they tested. And this was their Shepard vehicle for the same said Shepard that we named the Shepard test stand after.
Ah.
So.
Great minds think alike.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, but then yeah, like you said, we're talking global operations here by humanity. You know, in the same week we have a West Texas site, or in the same week or so, West Texas site, Copenhagen, and the Cape.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to SpaceX, that launch was also quite impressive. Those what are they, Draco, I think, or something like that, whatever they are,
I forget the name of the engine, but it went from, what was it, 0 to 100 in 1.2 seconds?
Yes, while dragging the trunk, the quote-unquote trunk, the exterior cargo module for Dragon. And just that look. I like roller coasters, but all I could think about it was, wow. Not only would I not want to ride that particular ride because it means something horrible happened to the launch vehicle, but the ride itself looked all sorts of crazy. Lots of
talk about extreme G loading.
Yeah, crazy. And of course, this is really important, you know, for those that are not as much of gearheads and technical, that are following some of the space news. This part of this test was important because this is part of their crewed launch vehicle, their crewed capsule, as part of replacing and supplementing the U.S.'s reliance on the Russian Soyuz launch vehicle to put astronauts into space, right? This is for commercial crew launch.
Returning the U.S. Manned launch capability.
Yep. And this is the abort system necessary to get the crew away from a launch vehicle or the rocket in the unlikely and terrible event of a catastrophic failure of the launch vehicle. And in fact, one of the reasons that NASA wanted to, if you recall from post-Columbia, right, and post-Challenger, both kind of was that NASA wanted to get back to launch vehicles that were stacked vertically instead of side by side, so that if something went wrong, all of it was happening below the crew, so that at any point in the launch, the capsule could evacuate away from the failing launch vehicle. So this is a absolutely critical piece of safety technology, and it really shows SpaceX is continuing to mature their engineering capability and their vehicle technologies. This is a company that 10-ish years ago, their first couple of launches were not just little duds. They were dropping their payloads on their launch facility, and things like that. So to come from where they started, and everyone does in rocket science, but they've come with a really nice pace. And continue to develop all the critical pieces to support their vision, which is impressive. And what a show it was to watch that thing's escape rockets fire off.
One of the differences, and something I don't expect to see out of SpaceX, is any kind of follow-on data or reports. They are known for being more closed source developers. So when Copenhagen might share openly the results, not so much with SpaceX.
Yeah, they're kind of an odd mix, right? They're compared to the other two, because we talked about two extremes. We have Blue Origin, who basically says almost nothing, and this is really one of the first times that we saw any of their stuff fly or operate very publicly on one side, and you got Copenhagen on the other, that that is very outreach oriented. They're very talky and share a moderate amount of technical stuff more lately. But in earlier times, it's been less, partly because I think of bandwidth and partly because the laws on this stuff are unclear. I mean, we certainly know about the laws being deeply unclear about what you can share with rocket technology. And then you got SpaceX somewhere in the middle, right? The engineering deeply closed. This is our secret sauce. But then you also have Elon Musk, you know, in some ways the template for the modern Iron Man character.
Yeah.
Right, sharing all the cool stuff, right, and talking about his vision to go to Mars and retire on Mars. A little bit of both, right?
Yep.
So,
if I remember correctly, there was didn't the Russians launch something? I think there was a Progress that was launched out of Russia as well.
There was a Progress that didn't go so well.
Didn't really make it, which was odd. Okay. Uncharacteristic for a Russian launch, by the way.
Absolutely. Well, and it wasn't a problem until it got on orbit. It was a attitude control system and attitude sensing system problem.
Okay.
If you saw any of the video, if you haven't, you should go look it up. Oh, quite the contrary, the exact opposite. It got into a deeply, deeply accelerated tumble.
Oh my.
I had folks from work emailing me links to the video from the onboard cameras that have been downlinked and commenting about how it reminded them of watching Interstellar.
Oh my. So not for those that have motion sensitivity.
No. And ultimately, they were unable to recover it, and they had to just let it its orbit decay.
So, it was supposed to
like
burn
you said,
up,
very
I think,
uncharacteristic. Yeah, I believe you're right. Yep. Very uncharacteristic. It reminds us space is hard, and let's be grateful that it was a unmanned cargo resupply vehicle and not a crewed capsule. Because it was unclear whether, because they tried to recover it, it's unclear whether or not had there been a crew on board, they would have had any better luck than ground controllers did recovering the vehicle. I mean, certainly they would have tried, but
like we were saying though, that system has worked very, very consistently for a long time. So hopefully they'll be able to track down the malfunction or whatever issues they had and fix it. So we'll see if that impacts any of their future flights.
Yeah, they are bar none. They have the longest track record of safety, partly by virtue of the longest continuous operation of the same basic pedigree of spacecraft, but they have a long history of getting it right after they got the initial system sorted out. So I have no doubt they will get that up and running again just fine. But a healthy reminder, space is hard. Space is very, very hard.
Speaking of a long history of getting it right, we had another major milestone happen, I guess, in the anniversary of Hubble Space Telescope.
Yes.
I think you have something to share with the group on that one.
I do. 25 years. First of all, it's 25th anniversary of Hubble. A vehicle that's important to remember that didn't get it right to begin with, but through tenacity and a very unique launch platform in the case of the shuttle, we were able to actually take a broken thing and fix it on orbit, and then upgrade it on orbit, which is kind of crazy. NASA released, as part of the celebration of the 25th anniversary, a 3D model of the Hubble Space Telescope. And I mean the 3D model source files so that you could print it yourself. And I spent last weekend printing this bad boy up.
That's wild.
There you go. Is that not awesome? So this is cool both on the let's celebrate the history of Hubble standpoint, but it's also cool because makers are 3D printing is a big maker thing, and as a partly DIY space organization, I mean we're open source and DIY and space all at the same time. maker tools and techniques are important to us. And the Yavin thruster is actually, and folks that want to learn on their own about rocket propulsion can do their own design of a thruster, manufacture it themselves, and then test it, and then make changes and manufacture a new one and test that one and see how the design principles and engineering decisions you make actually directly result in changes in performance, which means we need to be much more equipped for 3D printing. We have some volunteers that know a lot about 3D printing and some that know a little, and then you have me who hadn't had a 3D printer until this year. And so having a 3D printer finally means that, you know, I can do random things like this, and it's a chance to not only just have a cool model, but it's also a chance to learn more about my 3D printer. So, and an important thing that I experienced was I really have 1.5 models.
Oops. I'm sure there's an oops story.
It looks like oops. It's not exactly oops. I mean, it's certainly a story, but I'm going to file it under not oops, under there's one. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 print files. And the solar arrays are actually 2 different parts. The antennas here are 1 part. If I were to take it all apart, you could see that. So there's 6 printings I had to make to produce 7 parts and assemble it. So I'm your typical engineer. I started at the bottom and worked my way to the top. So I printed this piece first. And then I printed this piece. And when I say I printed this piece, I really printed this one right here. And what happened was the files from NASA's download site, when I printed them unchanged, all I did was ran them through my printer's slicing and then printing process. This part and this part were about 3% different in size, and they didn't fit at all. And I said, well, that's odd. So I got my calipers out and I measured and I found out the exact difference. And I said, huh? So I went in and rescaled this part to match, and I printed it up, and it fit the first time. All right, great. So I went back and I started printing more things bottom up. Printed the antennas, I printed the solar arrays and got those all attached. I went, hey, look, maybe it was just this one piece that was out of scale because these other pieces fit at the same scale as the first piece because everything's all fit together. That's awesome. And then I printed the main body tube. And I got a piece that was too big for the model I was building. I said, well, that's strange. And out of curiosity, I said, does it fit on the first out of size piece? And it did. So I scaled the body tube down and made another print, and it fit perfectly. It used the exact same scaling I'd used before. And so then I went to print the last piece, this cover, which is on the real satellite. There is a door to protect the scientific instruments inside the telescope so it can close so they don't get overexposed to light and temperature changes when they're not actually operating the telescope. And I printed it, and lo and behold, I said, huh, and it was too big for this one, but lo and behold, it fit on this one. And now I have half a model. I scaled it down the exact same percentage, and it fit here. So I have no idea why 3 of the components were around 3% larger than the rest of the components.
That's literally a head
I showed this to Jeremy. Yeah, it is. I showed it to Jeremy. He wondered if maybe there was some sort of intentional overage for shrinkage. This is all PLA. ABS sometimes has a greater propensity to shrink.
Those are different types of
but
plastic.
I don't know. Yes, thank you. Yes, so PLA is an organic plastic that's a little more common in the newer printers. It's a little lower cost to use and operate printers with PLA because it's a little bit simpler printers required to print it. ABS is a little bit older technology for 3D printers for plastic, but has a little bit better strength, but it requires a slightly more complex printer and print process to manage it, and is a little bit more prone to shrinking. But I don't know. Like you said, it's a head scratcher. NASA's got a feedback email address, and one of the things I intend to do here in the next few days is send them a little email, probably post a little report on P2 about all of this, and then send them an email and go, here's the exact difference, and what's up with that? So,
I'd be interested to know if anyone else has found it.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the website doesn't have a forum to talk about it on. They just have an email address that goes to someone over at their, I guess, outreach community, people.
Oh, and you can see one of the solar panels has the 25th anniversary on it. Yeah. Cool.
And I don't know if you can see, there's detail in the engineering model here of the engineering of the way that you can see this inner tube in the main body tube, and it's really quite a nice model for a display model.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy with how it turned out. It was also probably the most complex thing I've printed on my printer since I bought it. I mean, like I said, it's got 7 components that took 6 different print runs to render. And then it all fits together. It's all friction fit. It reminds me of buying models as a kid, and I do better now than I did when I was a kid. I didn't have the patience as a young man to do this kind of things, but I just kept printing out the parts. Anyway, a lot of fun. Congratulations to Hubble. A very fun project. I recommend it. And I'd love to hear if you do print one of these for yourself, whether or not you get the same result that I did, where you wind up with 1.5 models.
Yeah. Let us know about the scaling factors.
So yeah, so that was Hubble. So it's been a big month or so for space. A lot of big events out in the rest of the world, and giving us a chance to see how other people do things, learn to use our tools a little bit better as part of a distributed celebration. And it's also been a time for us to get ready for our big event in the summer. So it's been a busy month.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for more on all of that. We'll be right in the throes of Apogee preparation at the next month's Hangout. So spoiler alert, there'll be lots more stuff coming up in our community outreach planning piece.
And by then, we'll be in the middle of our first development cycle for the Avon thruster. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about the progress coming along in the development work for that. So it's been a big month, and it should be a big month coming up. And
anything else before I do a sign off?
No, I was just going to say, I think on that note, it's time to say goodnight.
Cool. Well, if you liked the video, we'll go through the spiel, right? Make sure to give us that thumbs up down below. And if you want to hear more about what Mach 30 has in the future, and be reminded of the monthly reports hangouts, give us a subscribe. And as always, we're a volunteer organization and rely on the donations from our volunteers and supporters. So check out mach30.org. In the upper right corner, the Catalyst Club link works for donations. Even though it still says 2014, that money will come to us this year, I promise.
From all of us at Mach 30, good night. And ad astra precipitatum, to the stars through community. See you all in June.